make a war between the nations. But some people think that we have something like a bug of killing inside. What do you think about it? Is it our human nature or not?
Well, in a way there's an obvious answer to that, and that is that we do it all the time, and nobody makes us do it. Therefore it must be our nature. It's not that we're acting unnaturally when we engage in war, we're doing something that people have always done. So yes, I mean, I think it's an obvious answer that it's in our nature.
But Howard Zinn said that...
Who is it?
Howard Zinn.
Oh, Howard Zinn.
Howard Zinn, yeah.
Okay.
Said something like that probably when some war is doing, during the war is some kind of propaganda for the nations. So that means that, therefore, without propaganda, some people wouldn't even go to war, go fighting. So why we have pacifism, the idea of pacifism, if our nature is...
Well, there are very few pacifists. So when we talk about what's in our nature, we're talking about something that, impulses that are present in most of us. Not necessarily all of us. You might say that it's our nature as human beings to have 2 arms and not to have 3. But some people have only 1 arm. And some people have the beginnings of a 3rd arm, so our nature allows for variations. There are some people whose nature is essentially non-violent and non-aggressive, and that affects their beliefs. But most of us aren't like that.
So you think that world peace is impossible?
No, I don't think it's not impossible. There's an English writer from the 18th century, Samuel Johnson, who said something like this, that all of what's good in human beings consists in resisting the impulses of their nature. And we have to figure out ways, and I think that's not quite right, there's some nice impulses in our nature as well, but we have to devise ways of constraining our nature, and we have done that with considerable success, but of course not completely, in our civil societies, through criminal law and gun control and practices of that sort. We manage to make ourselves less and less harmless with each other. It also helps if we form a community and we feel bound together in certain ways. So there are groups of people who experience solidarity and who tend not to fight with each other and kill each other, but their impulses then are directed to people outside their group. One of the things that we could do is try to bring more and more people inside our group until we're all within the same group. That would be one idea. Another way is to concentrate on improving international law and try to constrain the activity of war in the same way that within societies we use the criminal law to constrain the activity of murder. Yeah. We have fewer murders because we have laws and police, and what we need internationally is laws and people who are disposed to obey the law and some kind of police to make people obey the law. And so eventually we may be able to get rid of war. It's not absolutely inevitable. It depends on how clever we are. If we could do as well with our social institutions as we do with our little gadgets, our Blackberries and computers and things like that, if we put our cleverness into trying to stop ourselves from killing each other rather than into building nice little devices, we might get there sooner.
And a last question, but I think very open to say lots of things. Lots of people agree with the opinion that at war everything is permissible, that we are dealing with some kind of different morality in war than in real life, or even that there is no values during war. What do you think about this?
I think there are two versions of that view. There's the strong version of the view that you've just stated, which goes under the name of political realism or realpolitik, where somehow or other when conditions of war arise, the constraints of morality just disappear. Mm-hmm. I just think that's a ridiculous idea. Sorry, but if morality really does, if there really is morality and it does impose constraints on us, there's nothing about war that would make those go away. And I agree, I accept that there are some conceptions of the nature of morality, mm-hmm. In particular the Hobbesian conception of the nature of morality, according to which that could be true, that morality just goes away, that there are conditions under which morality arises, namely it requires a single sovereign who can impose his will on everybody, and so on. But I find that a completely implausible conception of what morality is. So I think political realism is just a non-starter. But I think the same thing is true of the more common view that when conditions of war arise, it's not that morality just disappears, but it changes. A new morality comes into effect when conditions of war occur. And the new morality is what permits soldiers on both sides to kill each other, where outside of war, the morality of conflict is asymmetrical between the people who are in the right and the people who are in the wrong. In war, that changes, and it doesn't matter which combatants are in the right and which are in the wrong. They all have the same rights and the same permissions and the same duties and the same liabilities and so on. People think that there's a new morality that appears when war occurs. And again, I think that that idea is completely implausible, and that we're misled into thinking that that idea has some plausibility by the fact that when conditions of war arise, a different body of law does come into effect. That is, yes, we do have a separate set of laws and conventions and norms that govern the practice of war, and they're quite different from the laws and so on that govern human relations in times of peace. But morality is not like that. If I have moral rights, if I have human rights, and some other country declares war on my country, that can't make my moral rights go away. Mm-hmm. On this view, Hitler could say, I declare war on Poland, and the Nazis come across the border, and now it's war, and suddenly the Poles don't have the moral rights they used to have, and Hitler managed to do this all by himself. You can't believe that. That's just not true.
So, the very last question from me.
The final question, part 2.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Point A. If you think that, in a way, the part of our nature is to fight and to making a wars, what do you think about the consciousness objectors?
Well, I have a general view about conscientious objectors, and that is that when the war is unjust, they're doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. If the war is a just war, then they're doing the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. But they can deal with the issue of killing another person, another human being.
Well, yes, I suppose there are some people who simply can't bring themselves to fight. They're not always conscientious objectors. Sometimes they go along and they just don't shoot their guns. and they get killed. I think that's quite common. It's more common than being a conscientious objector, I think. There was a study done by a man named S.L.A. Marshall, who was a general in the American Army after World War II, and he found that in the Second World War, only something like about 15 or 20% of the American combatants in the war ever fired their guns. So there are a lot of people who are psychologically averse to killing. Of course, after he found that out, they changed the way soldiers were trained in the United States so that they deliberately organized the training of soldiers to overcome this inhibition against killing, and they were quite successful. So if only 20% of soldiers fired their weapons in the Second World War, I think the percentage was more like 90% in the Vietnam War. That was because of the differences in training. So you can, with the help of psychologists, you can get people to overcome their inhibitions about killing other people. But I think sometimes the inhibition against killing another person is can prevent a person from doing what he ought to do. Because sometimes we ought to be violent. Sometimes we ought to protect innocent people against wrongdoers who threaten them. And if one can't bring oneself to do that, then that's a problem, because one can't bring oneself to do one's duty. So we should try to be the kind of people who are capable of using violence when it's right to do so, and are inhibited about using violence when it's wrong to do so. But we should bring our dispositions into alignment with morality.
So you think that, and point B, the last question, so you think that human, not only human, but life itself, it's not the highest value? Or is?
That's a hard question to answer, because I'm not sure I always think about these issues in terms of values of different degrees. But I guess one way to answer that is to say, no, sometimes the right thing to do is to make it the case that more people die rather than fewer. So, for example, if 20 Nazis will otherwise kill 10 Polish civilians, I think the right thing to do is to kill the 20 Nazis, if that's the only way you can stop them. So it's better that 20 lives should be ended than that 10 lives should be ended. So
kind of utilitarian
no, this is counter-utilitarian. This is the opposite of utilitarian, because the utilitarianism might say life is the highest value, save the most lives, do whatever will result in the fewest lives lost. And I think in this case you should do what causes the loss of more lives rather than fewer. So if that means that I think life is not the highest value, then I guess I don't think life is the highest value.
So when one soldier will be screaming at war, I'm fighting for justice. Here, the justice is a value, a higher value than life, for example. So
maybe. One of the reasons, though, that we want justice is that it enables people to have good lives.